what's up you guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I will be sharing with you guys my April 2022 TBR. So, April is about as jam-packed, but also not as jam-packed as March was, because in April I will be participating in 3 readathons over the course of the month, but 2 of them are month-long, 1 is at the end of the month, and pretty much all of the books that I have for this month for book clubs, reading series, they all pretty much fit into one another. I think I managed to squeak by without adding on too many books to my plate because honestly, with how chaotic March was for me, April's gonna be interesting because according to the reading schedule I have set up for April, I'm gonna have a much more relaxed reading time in the month despite having 3 readathons to do. So that's gonna be interesting. But I will be participating in Orillium's very first academy semester thing, whatever you want to call it. The first semester basically at Orillium Academy. If you want all the information about how the Orillium readathon stuff goes on, please go check out the stuff down below from G's channel because she explains it way better than I can. And basically the way I can describe it is that my character has completed the novice path, completed the gearing up section that was done in March, and is on her way to the first semester at Orillium Academy. And her career she's decided to go with as a wizard elf is the Master of Elements career, which specifically is a career that opened up to her because of the fact that she joined the Order of the Crescent after completing the novice path. Along with that, I also will be participating in Realmathon, which is being hosted by Cassidy, at Covers by Cassidy, which I'm super excited about because I was made aware of this through Greek Godathon that I participated in March, and I really like this idea because again, it is another high fantasy-esque world, but is more military based, and every book you read basically can go for a certain kind of prompt and you get more points based on the types of books you read if it fits your team. I am on Team Bale, which is I think the fantasy romance team technically, but I don't have to read any fantasy romance, and I don't think I have any on here that would be considered an anyway fantasy romance. First of all, before we get through anything in terms of prompts for the readathons, I do have to go through my D20 rolls and spins for this month. So because I completed my TBR for March, I do end up only having to have 3 spins and 3 rolls for this month. That is so exciting. I only have to read 3 books for D20, and that is going to be so easy for me to get through very quick in the beginning of the month. So without further ado, let's get to the rolls and the spins for April. Hey, what's up you guys? So basically we're going to be doing our Wheel of D20 spins for April. Please excuse me if I have to keep looking around. I do have Oscar in here and he is trying to get into stuff that he's not supposed to, but like I said, for this month we have 3 spins that we're doing because of the fact that I have completed my Wheel of D20 reads for March, and so then we get to go down to 3 prompts. So we're going to spin the wheel 3 times, coming up with a prompt, and let's see what we end up getting. So spin number 1, which we end up getting a new release within the last 6 months. So let's go ahead and do spin number 2, which we get a YA book. Awesome. So that makes it super easy. I have a ton of YA that I still have to get through, and actually quite a few of them could work for reading series that I'm currently already reading. So let's go ahead and do our final spin and see what our other prompt is that we get. An adult. Okay, so again, very easy to use, anything that I have currently working on for this. So honestly, I think other than the new release within the last 6 months, I have stuff like right in mind for picks for the rolls. So without further ado, let's go over and do the rolls. Okay, we've got some books, we've got our D20, it's time to do some rolls. So the first prompt we got from the wheel was a new release within the last 6 months. Now, this is interesting because both of these I'm kind of excited for, so it's not like I really want to read one more than the other. It's more a case of I've read the first book in the series of the one that I'm kind of technically more excited for, and I've been excited since its release. So that's kind of what my thoughts were on this. So I have Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which I am excited to read Gallant, but I have really only read one other V.E. Schwab book, and it was a little lukewarm for me. And we have an Oscar who wants to help make the decision. Hello, Bubba.
Are you gonna help us with rolling our D20 today? He is apparently vying for my attention today. I don't know why that is, but he wants to be involved. The book I'm more excited for is Wicked Souls, which is the sequel to The Marionettes by Katie Wismer. I have read The Marionettes and I absolutely loved it. I read it at the end of like the latter part of 2021 and I was in love with it. Everything I had wanted from it, and Wicked Souls I've heard is just as good, if not better. So let's see what we end up getting with this roll. And we got a 6, which means that I will have to read Gallant for my new release in the last 6 months. Again, I am still excited to read this, but again, I have only read really one V.E. Schwab book, so I don't know how I'm gonna like it. I've heard some people like it, some people don't, but I feel like that V.E. Schwab is a little hit or miss for most people, so who knows? Maybe I'll like this one as opposed to the one book I have read of hers already. Okay, next round is for our YA pick. So for this, I have put The Hate List by Jennifer Brown versus Archenemies by Marissa Meyer, the second book in the Renegades trilogy. Now, Archenemies is going to be already a part of a reading series I'm doing where I reread both Renegades, Archenemies, and then read for the first time Supernova, and finally finish my read of this series. So this one is already going to be on my TBR. It would just be really nice to be able to give this kind of 2 different things as opposed to one. And Hate List is the one that I am not as excited for because I have tried to read this a couple different times in my life, but for those of you that don't know, it is a book that does deal with a school shooting, and at the times I tried to read this, I had been unfortunately in a situation that was involving the shooting and death of people on my college campus, and it just never seemed to be the right time for me because that only happened here about 4 years ago now, actually, this past couple weeks ago, so it's definitely something that I've been meaning to actually try to read, but it's never been the right time because it's been a little too traumatizing in some capacity. So I'm not as excited for this because I feel like if I don't read this, I'm never going to, and I may just end up unhauling it if I don't end up having to read it this month because I don't foresee myself actually really reading this otherwise. So I guess let's see what the D20 has in store for us with this one. And it looks like I will be unhauling Hate List because the winner for that is Archenemies with a 20. So this will be counting for not only my reread / finish series, but now also for the Wheel of D20. And finally, we have our adult round. So for this, I have Thinner, which is my next Stephen King read for my Stephen King reading series. This one written under his pen name, Richard Bachman, one of the Bachman books. So very excited to get to this one. I've heard some pretty disturbing things about this one in particular, but the Bachman books have been kind of hit or miss for me. So we'll kind of see how this one fares compared to the other ones, but pin it up against this in terms of my least likely or my not as excited for book is The Mothers by Britt Bennett. This is a Kindle book that I have, and I just kind of not really heard much about this, but when it comes to contemporary adult stories that aren't romantic in any way, I have a harder time with sometimes. So I'm not saying that I won't enjoy this, but I don't know if at all I will. So I guess we'll see what ends up happening. And for this, we roll a natural 1. How the hell did that work where I rolled a natural 20 and then a natural 1 right after that? That is some kind of messed up, I guess. But for this, that means I will end up having to read The Mothers for the adult pick, which is totally fine. I'm interested to see if I do end up liking this, but I don't know, we'll have to see. Okay, so to quickly recap the books I ended up having for D20's rolls and spin. For the prompt of new release, I went with Gallant by Victoria Schwab, or as she's known here, V.E. Schwab. A little nervous about this one because I have really only read one other book by her and I was very lukewarm about it, but I am excited nonetheless because this is a brand new release, just got released here like I think maybe a month ago at best, and it's a fairly short one considering how big the book kind of looks, so I think I can get through this pretty quick. Next, for the YA prompt, I ended up going with my next book for my reread series for the Renegades trilogy by Marissa Meyer, Archenemies. This is book 2 and will be the second time I will have read this book, and I'm very excited about it because I do remember quite a bit of things that happen in this, but I'm excited to see nonetheless because I don't remember the ending as well, so I'm curious to see how I think about it this second time, and I will be going through and tabbing it
and annotating it like I have with my copy of Renegades. So I'm very, very excited for that one. And finally, for the adult prompt, I went with The Mothers by Britt Bennett. I did hear some kind of mixed things about this one in terms of a contemporary fiction. It is a little outside my comfort zone, but I'm getting more comfortable with contemporary fiction. And I have heard that this was pretty awesome in terms of looking at a family dynamic. So I'm curious to see how this one goes. Okay, so I want to go through the books that are for my reading series now because I do want to go over those super quick, and then we'll go over everything that is going on for the Orillium Academy semester and for Realmathon and for the third readathon that I totally forgot to talk about, which is Spring Fling'oween. Spring Fling'oween is a 4-day, basically half a week of reading thriller and horror books that is being hosted by Olivia from Olivia Reads a Latte and Gabby from Gabby Reads, I think, which is so weird for me to say my own name and it not be me. But I do have a couple of books for this because there's only 2 prompts you have to really fulfill, and then kind of more of a lifestyle prompt for during the weekend. So I'm really excited for that one. But let's get into the other stuff that I have to read this month, regardless of all of that. For my Stephen King read this month, I have Thinner, which is a book that he wrote under the name Richard Bachman. This is a really short one. All I really know about this is that a very overweight man has something happen to him, and after that event, basically he rapidly starts losing weight to the point of where like he almost could be dying, maybe something like that. I have really no idea. I did not know that this was a Richard Bachman book. I did not know this was a Stephen King book. So I'm curious to see how this one goes because I have not heard really anything about this one. Next, for the Brandon Sanderson read along that I am doing with my friend Princess at Castle Library, as well as her friends Bonnie from Bonnie Reads, Bree from Bree Cherie Reads, and Brandy with Books with Brandy Shanae. We are working on The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Mistborn series, and I really liked Mistborn a lot. And so I'm very excited to see how The Well of Ascension goes, but this one is much chunkier. This one is like almost 800 pages, and I think that Mistborn, the copy I had, was like 600 and some, so there's gonna be a lot more stuff going on here. But I don't really want to say much of what happens here because of the fact that it's the second book in a series, but from what I understand, this is gonna be piggybacking right off of Mistborn, and there was a lot of stuff that happened at the end of Mistborn that I was very much shook by. So I have no doubt that I'm gonna enjoy this to some degree because Brandon Sanderson has a very nice style of writing that I really appreciate and is very reminiscent of the next book that I'm going to be reading, which is my next Wheel of Time book. So Brandon Sanderson has a very similar writing style, I think, in a lot of ways to Robert Jordan, and that's why I really think I enjoyed Mistborn, which was really my first Brandon Sanderson book I ever read. So Well of Ascension should be interesting. But my next Wheel of Time book I will be working on is The Fires of Heaven. This is book 5, and I don't know what to expect with this series anymore. Like, I look at the synopses of these when I do my reviews for the books previous. I never really know what to expect going into these, but I have really enjoyed my time with this series, and I don't think that I'm gonna find a book that's gonna be like absolutely awful, or at least I haven't as of yet, knock on wood. But I'm excited to see where this goes nonetheless, because The Shadow Rising book 4 really has a lot of things changing that I'm interested to see what the ramifications of those changes are going to be. Next, I have the next book for my Witcher reading series, which is Sword of Destiny. This is technically the very first book in the Witcher series, or it's another compendium of stories, I think, maybe. I'm not 100% certain. I know that there's like a couple prequels in the Witcher series that you have to like read through before the main series, but Sword of Destiny basically is my next one. And I don't really know much about this other than it seems that Geralt is going to go fight more monsters and demons, which is what I really loved about the first set of short stories. So I think I'm going to enjoy this very much so. The next book I will be reading is The Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman. This is the final and newest book in the Practical Magic series. I don't know if this is going to necessarily be the last book. It is entirely possible, but this is at least the newest one that came out in October of 2021. This follows the children of Sally, but it also does involve Sally and Jilly as well as the aunts, because there is something basically that they are having to do in terms of breaking the curse that Maria had put on them for generations. I'm so excited to read this because I've really enjoyed reading the Practical Magic books at this point, and so it's just very sad, but also I think gratifying to be able to say that I will finish a series this year. by finishing off this one. And then finally, the last book that is a requirement for this month is my Royally Booked Club book pick for this month, which the book club that is hosted by my friend Princess at Castle Library ended up going with The Betrayals by Bridgett Collins. Yes, Bridgett Collins. I don't know anything about this. I really don't. Okay, now we're gonna get into what all of these books actually count for, because there's actually even a couple that are not requirements for this month that I do still need to talk about. So first, let's start with the Orillium ones, because those are like more set in stone, whereas the ones for Realmathon, basically everything that I will be talking about is going to count for something with Realmathon, so I'm not going to really get into it that much, but I will talk about like the prompts that they're going to complete in terms of whether they're going to be for knocking down points for the other teams or adding to my own. But let's start with Orillium first. So first of all, I have The Demon in the Wood by Leigh Bardugo. This is a novella, I think actually technically a short story within the Grishaverse. This is going to be to complete my prompt for my Elemental Studies class for Orillium Academy, which is to read a book under 100 pages. Next book that's kind of random that fulfilled one of my prompts is City of the Plague God by Sarwat Chatta. This is a Rick Riordan Presents book focusing on Mesopotamian mythology. I don't really know anything about this. I really do enjoy the Rick Riordan Presents imprint though, and I just thought it would work out pretty well because for the prompt, it is for shapeshifting, just to have a creature with claws on the cover, and we've got some kind of griffin, I think. Is that technically what it is? It's a lion with wings. Is that a griffin? I think so. No, griffin is a bird. What the hell is this? I don't know. Some kind of creature with claws. And it's part lion, they have claws, and there's also a panther right there that also has wings. They have claws. There we go. Next, for the class Animal Studies, which is to read a book that is a quick read, I have The Book of Magic, because this is a fairly quick read. It's under 400 pages. Next, for my class of Astronomy, which is to read a book that's at the top of my TBR list, I have Thin Air by Stephen King, because this is part of my Stephen King reading series. I'm going to be reading it anyway, and it is pretty much like a requirement for me, so it is at the top. Next, for the class Conjuration, which is to read a book with a source of light on the cover, I have The Well of Ascension, because there is this orb that does create a kind of flare, I guess. It does have light, so there we go. And finally, for my class Restoration, which is to have a book that contains healers, I have The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan, because the Aes Sedai tend to have a lot of healers, and there's also people that are wisdoms, which are basically also healers, so there's plenty to choose from. There's quite a few people here that have healing abilities. Okay, next for Spring Fling'oween, the books that I have for this are to have a book with a pink/yellow on the cover, or have a cover that is pink and or yellow. For this, I'm going with The Suffering by Rin Chupeco. Again, another book that was kind of random, but I was really interested in it because it was very much a creepy cover. I think it's supposed to be a thriller or horror of some kind, and I'm interested about this because this will also be my first Rin Chupeco book, so I think I'll like it because I have quite a few of her books. I would really like to like at least one of them, and I guess if I'm going to start with one, let's start with a scary looking one. And the other prompt is to read just a normal thriller or horror, which for that I've picked Thinner by Stephen King, because this is pretty much as thriller horror as you can basically get. Okay, now we're gonna go through all of the books that I have for this month, and I'm gonna tell you guys what they're gonna be counting for Realmathon, because they're gonna be each counting for at least one prompt to either give my team points or knock points off another team. So let's go. Okay, so first we have Gallant, which is gonna be for knocking points off of another team. The prompts this is gonna count for are First Blood, which is to read a book with red on the cover for 1 point, Cutting Off Their Magic, a book that I think takes place in an isolated area, which is going to be worth 3 points, and Interrogation, which is to give a author or book a second chance. This technically is going to be a second chance read for me for V.E. Schwab, because I have read only one other book by her and it was very lukewarm for me, so we're going to see how that goes, and that is going to be worth 4 points. So Gallant is going to give me 8 points to knock off of somebody else's team that I am able to knock off. I think I'm only able to do one of 2 teams at a time for knocking points off, so I'll decide that when I get there. Next, I have Archenemies, which is going to be used to gain points for my team with the prompt Build a School, which is to read a book that is either a YA or middle grade book, and that's going to be worth 2 points. Next, for the Mothers, that is going to be another book that will knock off points for another team. That is also fulfilling the prompt of First Blood, which is to read a book with red on the cover. This will give me 1 point. Next, I have the Well of Ascension, which is going to be for points to add to my team. The first prompt being Claim Your Territory, which is to have a book with a map for 1 point. And for the prompt of Build a Castle, which is to read a chunky book, which is worth 3 points. Next, the Fires of Heaven is going to be used to knock off points of another team. This one is going to be also completing the prompt of First Blood, which has, because this has red on the cover, for 1 point, and is going to be for the prompt In the Trenches, which is to read a book that is a part of a series, which is worth another point. This will be worth 2 points to knock off one of the 2 teams I am able to knock points off for. Next, for the Book of Magic, this is going to be adding points to my team. It's going to add points on my team for the prompts Make an Alliance, which is to have a book that features romance. I believe there is a romantic tie involved in here somewhere, and that is going to be worth 1 point. And then it is also going to count for Increasing Population, which is to read a book that involves some kind of family-based trope, mother-daughter, something along those lines, and that is going to be worth 2 points. So this is going to get 3 points worth of points for my team. Next, Sword of Destiny has actually one of the highest amount of points it's going to obtain. This is going to be to knock off another team's. This is going to be counting for First Blood as well for 1 point. In the Trenches, which is again to read a book in a series, for another point. Warhorse, which is to read a book that has an animal companion, for 2 points. And also Magical Warfare, which is to have a book that has some kind of magical weapons or warfare, for another 2 points. This is going to be worth 6 points to knock off another team. Next, City of the Plague God has the exact same amount of points, but to add to my team. The prompts this one will fulfill are, firstly, to train new first years, which is to read a book from a new to you author, which is worth 1 point. Then it also completes the prompt of Magic Training, which is to have a weapon on the cover, and there are some little spears here, which is worth 1 point. Then we also have Build a School, which is to read a book that is either a YA or middle grade book. This is a middle grade, and this is worth 2 points. And then this also completes the prompt for Supply Run, which is to read a book that is by an author that is from a different country than you. And Sarwat is living currently in London, I believe, in England. So that is worth another 2 points. This book will give me 6 points for Team Bale. Next, the Demon in the Wood is going to fulfill 1 prompt to knock a point off of one of the other teams. This is to fulfill the prompt Surprise Them, which is to read a short book. Next, to earn more points for my team, I have the Betrayals, which is going to complete the prompts of training new first years, again, to read a book that from a new to me author. Technological Advances, which for this one is to read either an audiobook or an ebook, for 1 point. Grow Crops, which is to read a book with green on the cover, for 2 points. And also Supply Run, which again is to read a book from an author that is in a different country than me. This one is basically, I think in England somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in the UK. Next, I have Thinner, which is going to be used for 1 prompt that is going to be worth 1 point, which is Hand to Hand, to knock off a point of another team, which is to read a book that is part of a buddy read. I'm actually going to be buddy reading this with one of my friends. Destiny is a subscriber and is somebody that I met in the course of Battle of the Bookish. She's my fellow Stephen King reader, so I'm very excited to see what her thoughts on this are. And finally, The Suffering by Rin Chupeco is going to get me 5 points for my team by completing the prompts of training new first years to read a new author for me, Make Technological Advances to read an ebook, Take Cover, which is to read a book that is spooky, for 1 point, and for a book to Build a School, for a book that is either a YA or middle grade. This book will earn me 5 points, like I said, and will be the end of my points for Realmathon. So total, I have 17 points that will go over to other teams and 26 points that will be accrued for Team Bale. So I think I've done a really good job with matching up as many prompts as I could to these books. So with that being said, those are all the books I have for this month. Let me show you the stack that I have. This is not including the ebooks that I have. I have 3 that are personal and 1 that I'm getting from the library. Apparently Oscar is sitting outside my door and I didn't know that, but these are all the books I will be reading for April. Please let me know what you guys are planning on reading, if you're participating in any of the readathons that I am, or if you're just reading for fun. What are you planning on reading in April? I would love to know, and wish me luck. I think I'm going to be able to manage it, I think, but who knows? Things could go topsy-turvy without me realizing, and I guess we'll see when that happens. So, thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys!